So we're kind of a low-budget operation. In addition to the speaker, I'm also the grip. So, all right. Well, good afternoon. I've got a long presentation. I'm going to try to get it into an hour. And before I get started, I like to just ask a couple of quiz questions. I like to get an idea of where my audience is at. All right. So if you'll just bear with me, this is easy questions. Just show of hands. First question: how many of you would like to make more money? All right, okay. You can get the advanced version. So question number 2, how many of you would like to live longer and happier? Maybe. All right, third question. Now this is the hardest question, but this is how I tell whether you get the PhD version, okay? And I don't want you to cheat off of your neighbor, so I want you to close your eyes. Everyone close your eyes. Okay, third question, show of hands. How many of you enjoy having sex? All right, okay, do it in this order. Put both of your hands down. And then you can open your eyes. All right, what if I told you that there are 3 simple questions, and if you ask these 3 simple questions throughout your life, you would make more money, you would live longer and happier, and you would have more sex? Would you be interested in hearing a speech about those 3 questions? Put both hands down. Well, I'm sorry. Kyle told me that I had to talk about leadership, so I cannot give you that speech. But the good news is, I'm going to tell you about a leadership concept called approachability, and I'm going to teach you 3 simple questions. And if you ask these 3 simple questions, these are keys to what I call the 1 ring of leadership. Now, I'm a gentleman, so I'm going to talk to you about leadership today, but if you listen carefully, those same 3 questions are the questions that if you ask them on a regular basis, you make more money, you live longer and happier, you're luckier in love. So you ready to hear that speech? Okay. Yeah? All right, good. This starts with a quest. If you can't tell by looking at my glasses, I am a nerd, right? A full-on Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings nerd, all right? And nerds go on quests. So for the last couple of years, I've been on this quest for what I call the 1 ring of leadership. And this is the story of that quest and what I believe that I have discovered what is really just sort of a fundamental behavior of good leaderships. You've probably experienced something like this in your own businesses, right? There's some leaders who if you gave them a test, they would answer all the questions right. They know what they're supposed to do as a leader. But then when they actually are out there leading, nobody will follow, right? They're kind of ham-handed. Okay. Then there's other folks that they would probably get all the questions wrong on the test, right? They may not know the subject of leadership all that well, but people will run through a brick wall for those people, right? Has any of you experienced people like that? Okay, we all have. My question, and what started my quest, was what is the difference between those people? What is it? And it's not like something that you go to a class for. It's a behavior, it's a belief, it's a way of looking at the world. What is the difference between those folks that are successful leaders and the ones that just don't make it? And that's where I started my quest. How many of you have seen this equation? Anyone ever seen this before? Anyone ever said it? Anyone said it this week? I said it all the time until I sort of went on my quest, which is happy employees. If I have happy workers, that they are going to create happy customers, whether they're internal or external customers, and that if I have happy customers, I'm going to have a better business. I'll get better business results. So what I need to do as an HR person, as an employee relations person, I just need to try to make people happy. And if I can get people happy, all this other stuff falls into place. Anyone ever thought that, believe that? So that's where I started. I started looking at every study I could find on satisfaction, on happiness in the workplace, and here's what I found. It doesn't actually work that way, right? Happiness or satisfaction is what's called a mediator. That's a fancy industrial psychologist word for saying that it doesn't actually, you don't find them together all the time. So you can find studies where the happy employees perform at a better level than the unhappy employees. Those studies exist. You can also find studies where the happy employees perform worse than the unhappy employees, right? And then there's also studies where it's just not much of a relationship at all. When you look at meta-studies, which are studies of studies, so they'll combine observations from many different studies, they basically find there's no relationship. A very, very weak relationship between happiness and business results, right? So I already had hit a dead end on my quest, right? Which is searching for happiness is not the answer. And you're probably asking the same question I was, which is, well, what is the answer, right? If happiness isn't the answer, what is it? And that's where I ran across these studies. A lot of people are researching this question, and they're really digging into what is the difference maker in both engagement and also in productivity. What delivers business results? And we've landed, I don't think it can be disputed anymore. We've landed heavily on this idea of organizational citizenship behavior, or OCB. I'll call it OCB as well. Organizational citizenship behavior. This study is just an example of many. In this case, 67% of the observed difference in performance. And this, you'll find studies at the task level, so the individual performance, but also the performance of business units, of groups of people. 67% of the observed difference related to one factor alone, which is organizational citizenship. What's organizational citizenship? Anybody have any examples? Let me tell you what it is, and then you'll think of plenty of examples. Organizational citizenship simply means stuff that you don't have to do, but you do anyway to sort of make life better for everyone around you. Okay? So organizational citizenship are things that, like, it probably won't show up on your performance appraisal. It's not something that you're going to get in trouble for if you don't do. You probably won't get promoted because you do it, but it is really, really valuable. This study was fascinating to me. This, by the way, was my touchstone. All right. The first time I read this study, I kind of went through it, and let's go through the results just really fast. So these guys, what they did, they studied 3,000 people who had actually made suggestions at work. All right. They looked at what did those folks have in common, and they looked at a number of different factors. These are three of them. So one thing they said is about 29% of them thought that they would get a reward or some sort of a gift, right? They might share in the results of the suggestion, or they might get rewarded in some way for making the suggestion. These weren't anonymous suggestions, by the way. Okay, so that was 29%. That's pretty good, right? 45%, they said that they did their suggestion because they thought that it would improve either their job, it would make their work better, or that it would improve their organization. Okay? So that's about a coin flip. About half the people thought about that with their suggestion. The third group, 80% of the population said, my supervisor is doing a good job, right? And that's why they made the suggestion. Now, I read this study the first time, and I thought, okay, well, this is really interesting. I think supervisors are really important. That kind of jives with what I'm thinking about. It's interesting, and I put this study back into a expandable file full of studies that may as well have been the Black Sea, and never would look at it again. Very, very easily could have been the touchstone that I never saw again. And then one night, and I don't know why, it was late, I pick up this study and I reread it, and I see this. There was one other finding that I didn't really pay attention to the first time. 87% of the people that made a suggestion said, my supervisor is approachable. All right? My supervisor is approachable. Now, there's two things that I want to point out about that. The first one is just the number itself, 87%. That's 9 out of 10. So when you survey dentists about sugarless gum for their patients that chew gum, they don't agree at this level of confidence, okay? Number two, go back to this last group, okay? 80% said my supervisor's doing a good job. 87% say my supervisor's approachable. There's about 10% of these supervisors that the employees think are, they're okay, right? My supervisor's not all that great, but my supervisor is approachable, and I still engage in the organizational citizenship behavior of making the suggestion. And that started me down this path of what the heck is approachability, right? Now, before I go any further on approachability, I want to tell you about this guy. This is the worst manager that I have ever seen in my life, right? Now, I'm not trying to brag, but when I say it's the worst manager that I've ever seen in my life, Kyle mentioned that we do a lot of work on union campaigns, right? So companies that have union campaigns, I'm sorry to say, because they're our clients, but they are messed up, All right, they don't like they're not. There's something has gone wrong before a group of employees decide, you know what, I want to be a Teamster. Okay, so I've seen a lot of bad managers in my career. This is the worst one, and for me to do this, I need a little help. Would you two guys help me? You come on up. This is called being voluntold. All right, so come on up stage. If you'll come over here, please. Brent?
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Ernie?
And Ernie, hi, it's nice to meet you. Okay, so Ernie, if you'll go over here. All right, now, so I'm Fred. We call this guy Fred the Finger. You might be able to see from the picture why. And Fred had this behavior. So he was the general manager of a distribution center in Charlotte, North Carolina. Fred liked football. So what he would do is he would talk, when he'd come in like on Monday, he would talk about the football game over the weekend and something, probably complaining about how the Charlotte Panthers lost the last game. But he would get into conversations with folks. So you're a supervisor, and he would just start chatting about football, right? So typical, nothing really bad so far. So he's talking about football. So an employee of Fred's comes up. There's a big order that needs to get out. He's got a question that needs to get answered. He comes in, he drives up his fork truck, and then he begins to approach Fred. Come on up, Ernie. And Fred, as soon as the employee gets into Fred's peripheral vision, Fred goes like this. All right? And he continues his conversation. So he keeps talking about football. And the employee, Ernie, can understand, right, that this is not a work-related conversation. This is a football conversation. Now, is that comfortable? No, not comfortable. It may as well be a different finger, right? All right, so this is not...
I thought you meant...
yeah. So, yeah, you mean being called up on stage without notice? Is that comfortable? That's not comfortable either. So this is not what made Fred the worst manager that I've ever seen. This wasn't it. What made Fred the worst manager I've ever seen was simply his stamina. All right, so this behavior was legend. When we got on the ground, it was legend. One of the first things we heard is that this guy puts his finger up in people's faces. Not just for like a minute or 2 minutes. They started clocking him. All right, literally, there would be so in addition to all the time wasted like this, there would be another employee like behind the wall clocking how long Fred would do this. What do you think was the longest period of time Fred held his finger in somebody's face? 5, 6, longer. 33 minutes. Now, so my arm is burning off right now. So I don't know how he did it. And so thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Now, this is how I define approachable leadership. And all of these examples, we've all experienced this in our lives. We experience both approachable and unapproachable behavior in our lives. And the way that I define approachable leadership is like this. First of all, it's about connecting. So if you look at the Latin word for approach, it's approche, and that, when you define that, it is getting close to, drawing nearer, that's one, okay? Or neighboring. And I love that idea of neighbor, of neighborly, okay? So it is creating a connection through neighboring or through drawing near, all right? And so there's a couple of behaviors, 3 behaviors that are really important here. The first one is being open. So we talked about open door versus closed door, right? That's an open behavior. But just because the door's open, it doesn't mean you're there, right? So the door can be open, but then when you start the conversation, the cell phone rings and you answer, right? So there's also this welcomeness to it. You're not an interruption to me. I welcome you to come in and talk to me, okay? So there's openness and welcomeness. And then the third part of it is seeking understanding. And you're trying to understand 2 things. You're trying to understand needs. Is there something that this individual needs? And desires. Is there something that this individual wants? All right? So you're looking for needs and desires. Because we're leaders, we sometimes have leverage over those needs and desires. And so in addition to sort of understanding the needs and desires, if possible, we want to try to meet those needs and desires, right? There's going to be cases where what somebody wants or what somebody needs isn't something that we can provide. That's okay. That doesn't mean that you're a failure as a leader. But the key thing is that you want to understand what it is that they need, what it is that they want. All right? So approachability is openness, welcomeness, seeking understanding, needs, and desires. Does that make sense? All right. Now, I've got 3 questions that I want to teach you that are a way for you to start your own approachable leadership journey.